off the ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Now you're welcome along. So we are talking
Screen
rugby.
time
An
with John
extraordinary afternoon yesterday at the Stade Velodrome. La Rochelle 24, Leinster 21. Extraordinary game, extraordinary closing 10 minutes. Arthur Retier eventually touched the ball over after a prolonged period of pressure on the Leinster try line. There was no time for a Leinster response, and so Ronan O'Gara, European winner as a player, now European winner as a head coach, and Leinster once again, as has been the case really for 2019 and 20 and 21, have to reflect on a painful lesson. Very happy to say Fiona Hayes is with us, Grand Slam winner with Ireland. Hi Fiona.
Hey Joe, how are you?
Yeah, very well. And Cian Tracey of the Irish Independent was at Stade Velodrome. Cian, for a very memorable occasion, I'm sure. Gives a sense of the atmosphere first of all, then we'll get into the particulars of the game. Looked like a lot of Leinster fans managed to travel over, and needless to say, a lot of yellow flags as well.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible over here, Joe. The La Rochelle fans just brought so much colour in their yellow, which seems like an obvious thing to say, but my God, they made some noise. It wasn't sold out. I think it was maybe 8,000 short of a sellout, but the place was rocking from start to finish. I came over on Thursday, and since Thursday, the place has just been chock-a-block full of fans. The Challenge Cup was on Friday night, so you had plenty of Toulon fans and Leon fans milling around, but definitely one of those days where you were really appreciative of the job that you're in to be in a place like that, because these are the kind of things we've missed, didn't we, during lockdown as well, that they were the kind of thoughts I had. That you think back to the Leinster La Rochelle game last year, and that was played behind closed doors, and this was the exact opposite really. It was a very, very special occasion, full of admiration for the Leinster fans who did make the trip. It wasn't cheap to get here by any means, but they were drowned out by the La Rochelle fans. It actually felt like a home game. I'm sure it probably came across on TV as well. It felt like we were in La Rochelle for the game, and I'm sure you've probably seen the pictures and the videos of what's going on in La Rochelle at the moment. I think the squad flew home at 3 a.m. last night, and there was thousands of people at the airport waiting for them. So when you kind of take your Irish hat off for a second, you couldn't begrudge La Rochelle their success at all.
Well, let's hear from the coaches then. La Rochelle were all about resilience, really. Beaten in last year's final, they have come again this season, and even yesterday, 6 points down early on. They were 5 points down at half-time when they would have had every reason to feel they should have gone in ahead at half-time. And then they were 8 points down until the 59th minute. And really the only time they led in this game was after the 80th minute. So that's a pretty extraordinary resilience, not least when you're against Leinster. That was something Ronan O'Gara, when he was speaking to various journalists, including our own Will O'Callaghan here, that was something he was speaking about.
18-10 for me, it showed the character of the team. It was easy to escape mentally, it was easy to down tools. This is Leinster going for their 5th star, but I'd like to think we've installed a small bit of fighting Irish spirit in the Frenchies. Will Skelton fronted up, Winnie Antonio was good. We really wanted to win the game. It's as simple as that. It sounds like a bit of a, but I suppose my overriding sentiment is just I'm proud of that 23. They stuck at it and found a way, and Arthur Retier scores a brilliant try, but that's him. He's like a brilliant goal scorer in football, you know. He knows the way to the try line. His stats are off the chart, and it's very, very big day for the club, very big day.
It sure is. And then Leo Cullen here talking to Will O'Callaghan. Won't have escaped anyone's attention that La Rochelle won this game 3-0. Not something anybody, I think, anticipated. So here's Cullen.
It's part of the frustration as well, Leo, that you didn't create too many try chances yourselves during the game. It was very reliant on penalties. By comparison, they probably had a couple of tries they left behind too.
Yeah, but we're camped on their line at a few different stages during the game. We're inches from getting over, and they go very aggressive, as we know, during that defensive breakdown, and they gave away a lot of penalties during the course of the game. So, but yeah, that's the game. It's high pressured. It's really tight margins, isn't it? and that's the bit that you need to try and get right, like to put in that really big performance on the biggest days. And like if we're being totally honest, we didn't probably quite deliver our very, very best today. But that's a lot of credit to La Rochelle as well, because they came with a plan to try and stifle some of the things that we normally would do well.
It's on the final note about the URC, top seed, still in a very strong place to do well in that competition. Just a case of dusting yourselves off and getting back out there again now.
Definitely, yeah. Like it's just getting back on the horse, so to speak. So it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard just to turn it around. But we'll be at the RDS, and hopefully we get a big crowd there, because as I said, a lot of sacrifice going into the team this year. So there's the players that give so much, there's the backroom team that gives so much, the supporters, massive effort, like for people to get here for the game today, like we're so appreciative, and there's thousands of people back home as well that obviously they turned up in the Aviva for the Toulouse game, turned up over in Leicester for the quarter-final in Welford Road, and it means a huge amount to the team. So hopefully we can get a good crowd at the RDS, and we'll try and put in a better performance in the quarter-finals and start to build in for what's beyond that. But for now it's just trying to recover and try and raise the spirits of the group a little bit at the moment. So lots of good things have happened so far this season. It's devastating to lose, particularly in the manner that we've lost the game, but it's turned around and learned some painful lessons, unfortunately.
Yeah, more painful lessons for Leinster in Europe. That's Will O'Callaghan there asking the questions of Leo Cullen. We have Cian Tracey and Fiona Hayes with us. So Fiona, we could start here with what went wrong for Leinster, or we could start here with the O'Gara story. I think let's go with the O'Gara story, because what he's done here merits headline treatment. We've put a bit of Irish fighting spirit into the Frenchies, one of the standout lines there from that interview. His coaching CV is rather extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it was a coaching masterclass. We looked at, I talked all in the build-up previous to this. We're looking at Leinster, how strong they are, how they've improved in the areas, ball carrying and all those different areas. But ROG got that team to stick with them. They were down. The discipline wasn't great at times, but they reverted back to their scrum. They reverted back to their maul, the things they were really, really good at. And you saw a lot of character, and he's definitely built that in them. And especially the big standout for me was Will Skelton coming back after being injured, lasting that 80 minutes. I looked at him, I think around the 68th minute, I said, he's definitely dead in his feet, he's gone off. But he had the character to keep on going and last those 80 minutes. And I think Ronan O'Gara has to be congratulated, and the coaching staff, on building that into these guys, because we saw a real want from them, and they were just immense in those last 12 minutes in ball retention. First
10 minutes, Fiona, Leinster looked supreme. The shape was good. Yeah. They were picking holes in the La Rochelle defence. They could have very easily had a try. They were 6-0 up. It looked like this could be Toulouse-esque type performance, given what they did in the semi-final. And then on 11 minutes, Raymond Rule scored that try pretty much out of nowhere. Certainly they had no momentum at that stage. I don't think Jimmy O'Brien and he was, I think, thinking about trying to help out Furlong inside him. And Rule is a great player. I mean, and he's proven that on a few occasions. He only needs a little bit of space, and suddenly it's 7-6. And West kicked the penalty. If you're looking for like a bellwether moment, he kicked that penalty with a bit of confidence. It's 7-6. And from that moment on, you would have to say La Rochelle really pretty much had the better of it. There wasn't like a distinct Leinster purple patch for the remaining 70-odd minutes.
No, and I think what was strange, and I know it's probably been talked about a lot, what was strange is you would think with this Leinster team, when they got some of those penalties, I understand the first kick, they came out with intent, and that first penalty they got, they went down the line, and I thought this is how they're going to go with this game. They're going to really attack La Rochelle and bring it to them. But it was almost like any time they got momentum, they gave away a penalty, and then, La Rochelle gave away a penalty, and they'd kick for post. So I think it took it out of their game that we saw very few backline attack moves. I know Henshaw had a couple of line breaks, but other than that, we didn't see those forward and back interlinking like we'd seen before. You have to take your hat off to that La Rochelle line speed and how they got up and were in the face, and they definitely put a lot of pressure on Johnny Sexton. There was a couple of borderline late hits in there, but that's the name of the game. And it was almost, Leinster looked tired at times, I thought. I know the heat was massive out there, but I didn't see the team and the attacking that I know they're really good for, and it just didn't show up in that game. And that you can look at how La Rochelle defended them in that, but I also think they didn't try any of these things that they were trying all season. They were slightly reserved for me.
Cian, you watch Leinster play live a lot. To your eye, what was happening in front of them that meant they weren't putting together the kind of interplay and the backline moves that are like synonymous with, in particular this season and over the last number of years? What is it La Rochelle were doing?
In simple terms, Joe, it was very large men running off the defensive line very fast, but obviously it goes a lot deeper than that. And like, I think this defeat is seriously damaging. I think it's going to be more damaging than the semi-final defeat last year, because when you think about it, I know Leinster were missing some key players. It was played behind closed doors. You have all those kind of elements that certainly have to be mentioned. But Stuart Lancaster and Leo Cullen pretty much went back to the drawing board after that game. And everything they've done since has been about devising a new game plan that would be good enough to beat the likes of La Rochelle. So it was perfect that they got a chance against La Rochelle to see how far has this game plan come on, and is it good enough to beat the best teams. And ultimately it wasn't, and I think that is seriously damaging. I don't think La Rochelle did anything on yesterday that Leinster weren't expecting, so you can't say that they pulled some sort of rabbit out of the hat or anything like that, because it just wasn't the case. And like you kind of touched on it there, Joe, and Fiona did as well. Their shape early on, you could see them getting into the pods of 3 forwards, but I just watched the game back there, because sometimes when you're at it live, you tend to miss stuff, particularly when your head is buried in the laptop. But I was shocked with how little they were able to get into that shape. And I do think that so much of that credit has to go to La Rochelle. They are an exceptional team. I think they're truly are deserving champions. But you can hear Leo Cullen there talking to Will about, turning the page, going to Glasgow. But if we're being realistic about this, Leinster judge themselves off success in Europe. If Leinster win another URC title this year, is it a successful season? It depends on how you define success. But if you were to ask Johnny Sexton or any of those guys, the Champions Cup is the one that they want to win. And this idea now that they'll turn the page and that they will finish the season strong is all well and good, but they're going to be waiting a hell of a long time to get back into this position. And for someone like Sexton, he now only has one chance left at winning that 5th Heineken Cup. And I think they've made no kind of secret of, and they call it themselves the drive for 5. They want to get that 5th star in their jersey, but it's become such a mental thing now at the moment. And I think Fiona is right. You just have to give credit to Ronan O'Gara. I thought it was a masterclass, because it wasn't just the brutal physicality that we know La Rochelle are capable of, and there was plenty of that as well. But they played some brilliant rugby. That Raymond Rule try was just, I thought it was sensational. I know you're right, Joe, it did come out of nothing, but the link play, that was the kind of try we kind of expected to see from Leinster. And if anything, I thought it was La Rochelle were the ones who left tries behind them and not Leinster. And again, you can kind of get a different sense of it from being at the ground. And I know they left it late and they scored in the last play of the game, but I felt like if La Rochelle had lost that game, it would have been a travesty for them, because I actually thought they were the better team in pretty much every aspect except discipline. So, like I said, they left it late, but they were well worth the win, I thought.
It was interesting. Post-match, O'Gara was talking, and he was saying at half-time his players were sulking a bit and they were fed up because they felt, one, they should have been ahead at the break, and they probably should have. Leinster got out of jail twice, and then great Jimmy O'Brien kick up the field, and Leinster take advantage of must have been Doolan got caught, and suddenly it's a penalty, and that was a 10-point turnaround in effect. So La Rochelle players a bit down in the mouth about that, and also they felt they were on the wrong side of Wayne Barnes at the breakdown, and they patently were. I mean, they were really struggling on the discipline front. They gave away 13 penalties in total to Leinster's 11, and Leinster gave away quite a few at the end. So on the penalty count, Leinster really won that. But what O'Gara said, Fiona, was he was very aware coming into this match that Leinster score 60% of their tries in the first 20 minutes, whereas we, La Rochelle, score 60% of our tries in the final 20 minutes. So his message at halftime was 12-7, sign me up for that.
Yeah, and it's just brilliant for a coach to be able to go into a dressing room and deliver that message. As players, you're sitting, you're looking around, and he no better man, I'd say, to tell him to snap out of that sulk fairly quickly. But it's having those stats and talking to these guys and telling them exactly, we can do this, and installing that confidence. And that's, you can see when they came out for that second half, they got the first score after half time. From that kick-off, obviously it wasn't a great exit by Leinster and they were caught under the post, but you could see that they came out and They really believed that they were going to win this. They knew they had the physical factor, but they also were very aware that they weren't giving Leinster an opportunity to get those offloads. They weren't doing anything damage, and even at that breakdown, you know, they gave away penalties, but how much did they slow down Leinster ball? We've talked about all season, every pundit, everyone talks about that 3 seconds, how they're so efficient at getting that and getting the ball away, and Gibson Park has the ball on a plate, and they were really, really good at doing it illegally at sometimes, but you could see that it really affected Leinster's game plan because they weren't set up. Things were too slow coming out and they were static. There was no players running onto the ball, so it was just really working for them, and it was brilliant.
Well, I think that's a great point. So the Leinster ruck speed all season we're talking about averages 2.84 seconds, often under 1.5 seconds. So all week in conversations with seasoned observers like yourselves and pundits, and trying to pick holes in how Leinster might be beaten, and I wasn't getting much back. I didn't, and no one seemed to see this coming really. I wonder if we're a touch in an echo chamber here, because even chatting to, you know, Shane Horgan pre-match ahead of the match yesterday, and he obviously over in the UK, and he certainly didn't get the sense in the media over there that they saw it as such a clear-cut conclusion as we did over here. And so, for instance, on that ruck speed, Fiona, I would, you know, spend a lot of last week saying, well, you know, what if it's slowed down? And the sense seemed to be, oh, well, look, Leinster, they have such great footwork. They've got, you know, a coach who specialises in this area, and they pick soft shoulders, and their ball positioning is so good, and etc., etc., etc. And I think that was a fair argument for them to make, because we hadn't seen Leinster's ruck speed really slow down, and yet boom, it happens. La Rochelle do it, a bit illegally, I'm sure, as well, but like, welcome to the real world. What's the Leinster plan B then? You got this real sense of Leinster not suitably road tested all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like obviously that 1 second or 2 seconds made a huge difference to the runners, because how many of the Leinster players were static? So it was almost like the slowing down of the ball, their runs were out of sync, the guys getting into shape, the formation definitely wasn't like we'd seen it, and we saw it in the first few minutes, the opening 10, it was brilliant. So it was kind of like they didn't have a plan B. Maybe they should have set up a bit deeper, I don't know, but there was almost a shock kind of there that, yeah, they gave away the penalties and La Rochelle were happy to do that, but it really, really interfered with Leinster's game plan, and we saw it for the full 80.
Keane, Leinster slow ball. How many times this season?
Yeah, exactly. But like, I mean, you know, are we in an echo chamber? Maybe a little bit, but I think a lot of people were praising this Leinster team. I don't think it was just Irish journalists, to be fair. And even if you look at, I know you had Ross Hamilton on, and if you look at the stats, like they back it up. But like Ronan O'Gara had so much ammunition to come at any of us afterwards and say, well, look, everyone wrote us off, and it would have been kind of a real kind of Munster kind of attitude. But honestly, he didn't even go, there was no chip on his shoulder. I think he was seriously, I would say, confident that they were going to win. I was at the pre-match press conference on Friday, and he was telling us, he told us that he felt like there was something special coming tomorrow. And, you know, sometimes you can read those comments and listen to them and be like, okay, of course the head coach is going to say that. But you kind of touched on an interesting point there, Joe, about kind of his halftime team talk. And I know that on Friday he apparently delivered an exceptional team talk, I believe, at the team hotel in Marseille. So he kind of, what he did was he took the emotion kind of out of it, because you know you can play on the emotion of a Champions Cup final anyway. But he actually just got stats and data that basically showed the players why they were better than Leinster. And I was talking to the sporting director of La Rochelle about this after the match, and he was in the room at the time, and he said, like, the lads, like, the players were seriously buzzing after it, because it's all well and good a coach telling you, and like no, they knew that they were the underdogs going into this, but when a head coach is showing you stats and data of why you're a better team. And afterwards, Ronan O'Gara had told us that he identified the last 20 minutes as the time that they were going to catch Leinster. And if you think back to that absolutely ridiculous yellow card that the second row got, that was the time where Leinster should have really pressed on their advantage, and instead that was where La Rochelle grew in confidence. And I thought it was stunning, really. And you know, Fiona kind of touched on a point there as well, that I thought their tactics were interesting. Look, it's cup finals rugby, and you want to keep the scoreboard ticking over, and that's absolutely fair enough. But I just felt that, like, La Rochelle were so cynical, and they were happy enough to give away 3 points because, again, I feel like they were so confident that they were going to score tries. They were like, okay, well, if you're not going to take us on, just have your 3 points, because the very first penalty that Leinster got was after a minute of the game, and it was kickable, and they went for the corner. And I was kind of thinking, okay, this is the strategy that they have played, and we've seen Ireland do it as well, because we all know like the Leinster team is basically Ireland, but Sexton as captain over the last couple of years, he's taken on this sort of, I would say, aggressive mindset that we're going to take teams on, we're going to go into the corner, and it's paid off brilliantly. But they did it after the first penalty, and then they didn't really do it at all after that. So
because it didn't work out, I wonder, did they send something?
Exactly, and this is what I mean. Like, I wonder, like, how much are La Rochelle in Leinster heads at the moment? You know, they didn't come away with a try after they'd went to it, and after that they took their points. And look, if Leinster ended up winning the game, you're thinking, you know, brilliant, they kept the scoreboard ticking over and that. But I just felt that La Rochelle were seriously growing in confidence every time that Sexton pointed to the post. Like, there was one either side of half time as well. So we had the scrum penalty against the head. Leinster go down the other end of the pitch, and they very nearly score. Josh van der Fleer makes a brilliant carry, and you're kind of thinking, okay, you know, you could go for the jugular here, and really, like, I think that would have been an ultimate sickener for La Rochelle, because it looked like they were going to score at one end, and then if Leinster had got 7 points down the other end, and then about 6 minutes after half time they got another penalty. Again, they were camped on the La Rochelle line. They were happy to give away penalties. You're kind of thinking now, Wayne Barnes could give a yellow card here as well, but he didn't. And again, I was watching it back. The pack looked like they were kind of getting ready to, you know, go again. That it was going to be maybe a line out, but between them, Johnny Sexton and James Ryan said, no, we're going for the post. And again, I just think that gave La Rochelle belief.
As you were talking about the
O'Gara. Sorry, I know it's kind of like. Sorry, Joe. Sorry, there's a delay there. I know it's kind of like a hindsight thing, but it's, you know what I mean. It's difficult to get away from the sense that Leinster didn't score a try. I was looking at it there. They had scored 47 tries in their previous 7 Champions Cup games this season. Like, it's insane, and not to score a try in the final then it's not good. Whatever way you look at it.
No, absolutely not. As you were talking there about the O'Gara pre-match speech to his players, I was just thinking all the way back to 2000 when he was a young player, and generally there's an acceptance amongst that team that they were almost too emotional the night before, and they almost all stood up and spoke about what Munster meant to them and why this was so important, and there were tears, and they realised maybe they had overdone it on that front. So 22 years later to be just talking in stats and here's why we're better, it just shows he's picked up so many things from different places along the way. On the rugby, do you know what he did mention as well, Joe, which I thought was really interesting. So we kind of, like, this was La Rochelle's 3rd consecutive final when you think that they got to the top 14 final as well. So as he put it himself, if they had lost yesterday, they'd be branded bottlers. You know, they don't know how to win the final. And it took Ronan O'Gara 3 attempts to win one as a player, but he was recalling how before the 26 final when they beat Biarritz that Paul O'Connell gave a speech in the dressing room before the match, and the essence of it was we have to go out and play. You know, that we've been in finals before and we haven't played rugby, and that was the mantra that he went with his La Rochelle team as well. And you'd have to say it paid off fully. Like I said, 3 tries to none. They were the ones who wanted to play the rugby, and that goes back to my point about Leinster taking the points. They were happy to keep the scoreboard ticking over rather than, you know, saying let's play a bit more rugby. And for me, I think that that's a mental thing. I think La Rochelle are now totally in Leinster's heads. Just to go back to the ruck speed for a second, Fiona, because it is so integral to how Leinster play. Bernard Jackman, in his piece in the Sunday Independent, was referencing how slow the ball was, and he name-checked, I think it was a Welsh coach, I'm not too sure, but he name-checked a coach who would have various training drills whereby the ball was deliberately slowed, as in you just couldn't take the ball for 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, for instance, and then, right, go break down a defence now with slow ball. You'd love to know if Leinster maybe doing that on these famous stews days where the tempo is up and it's quick, and it's quick, because that's something they're going to have to look at, is slow ruck ball when it's going to happen at some stage, you feel, in the knockout stages of Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, like there's teams all season trying to do that. And it's an area I'm sure every team have gone in with a game plan to focus, because that was probably one of the areas that you could hit Leinster in, and bigger packs maybe carrying into them. But it's definitely something. And I would imagine that because it hasn't really troubled them. And we talked about how their ball carrying ability and all that has been exceptional in finding those soft shoulders and all that kind of stuff. So I would imagine that they haven't worked on that, because with this new kind of game of rugby, it's all fast, it's move the ball, it's keep the ball alive, it's keep it going, and you train with that kind of intensity. So I would imagine that it's not an area that they've worked on someone getting in and having some prop lie on top of the ball or whatever, because you know what, like Wayne Barnes is a stickler in that area, and they just seem to do perfectly. La Rochelle, they did give away the penalties, but you could see the handout grabbing Gibson Park for just a second at times, and they just managed that discipline perfectly, I thought.
So post Bilbao 2018, it's been Saracens twice, La Rochelle twice, and Will Skelton always. Like at this stage, do they just need to buy Will Skelton? Is that like, we just save everyone a lot of trouble here? I mean, it's extraordinary. Skelton's still playing on 78 minutes, 79 minutes, still making carries, Fiona. I mean, he'd had 13 minutes preparation.
He was so good. I was thinking there's no way this guy is going to be fit and ready to go, because I saw him. He had the 13 minutes the previous week, and he looked dead on his feet after the first 5 of those. But I just thought he was absolutely immense. It's like he lights up when it's big cup games, rugby. He's a player that takes to the stage and he loves it. But he looks like he's happy playing. He's carrying, he's making those meters, and his work rate, especially with La Rochelle, I've seen his work rate has come up massively, and that's got to do with the coaching staff and how they deal with him. He's just been immense, and for a man his size to keep going. And you know, like I think it was the 78 minute, I think Dante went on to the 68 minute, Dante had to go on to the side of the scrum, and you just saw Skelton's side of the scrum. They absolutely blitzed Leinster, so he still had it in him in that, and that was probably the start of, they got the penalty from there and went up the line, and that was the start of those 12-13 minutes of sheer La Rochelle dominance in attack.
Yeah. Antonio and Skelton, that must be the biggest tight head side in history, I would think. I mean, that
I wouldn't fancy going
and actually it's great that you've watched it back again, Keane, because there's so much to take in. So certainly a strong memory from yesterday is the Leinster scrum going backwards and struggling, but it didn't feel like the decisive issue akin to the World Cup final, say, between England and South Africa. What was it like watching it back this morning?
Yeah, it didn't. I just thought a lot of the foundations of Leinster's game was poor. I mean, I think we discussed this the last time I was on the show, that they, coming into the game, they conceded 9 scrum penalties in their previous two European games.
You really flagged that more than anyone, actually, the scrum.
The first scrum of the day yesterday, they conceded a scrum penalty, and this is what I was saying, that a referee is only human if he or she is doing their homework, which they do, and going, okay, well, Leinster have a tendency to concede penalties now, and that's what happened yesterday. So it wasn't a decisive factor, but the line-out had issues, the line-out maul had issues, their line speed I thought was poor at times. So, like, you talk about preparing, you know, Fiona saying that, you know, would they have been working on this slower ruck speed? Like, you'd hope that they were, because, like I said, La Rochelle didn't do anything that they wouldn't have been expecting. So it's a big issue, and look, the broader point of this is it's a big issue for Ireland as well, because all of these issues that Leinster have mean that Ireland are going to have the same issues, and now suddenly the series in New Zealand looks, to me, even more daunting, no matter what happens in the URC.
Well, you can draw a line from Stade de France and France going after Ireland at the breakdown to what La Rochelle did to Leinster. That's a fairly clear line. It's hard. Like, Fiona, what do we say of Leinster here? Like, we spend 98% of the season saying they're the most wonderful team, they're blitzing everybody, they're the best team in Europe, they are to be applauded, and I think all that stands. And then there's always the proviso, well, let's see how they go against a big team in Europe, and that's, depending who we're talking to, discounted as, oh no, they'll be fine, or else, yeah, that they still have to pass that test. So now here we are again, 4th year in a row, and it's Leinster have been supreme and played the most eye-catching rugby all season, and they've fallen. So what are we saying of Leinster here over the last 2, 3, 4 years? You
see, that's it, Joe. It's like we've looked, and you know, and they've acknowledged that they've got to look at that area. I mean, that Toulouse game probably didn't stand them any good because they absolutely blitzed them, and probably we saw a tired Toulouse pack. So Leinster really weren't against a big physical pack. Leicester were slightly, but they didn't dominate Leinster at all. So they hadn't had that challenge of bar La Rochelle the year before, and they hadn't really, but we just presumed in watching how they dealt their footwork, watching Van der Fleer, watching the ball carrying, watching they changed their presentation, they were getting sharper, they were getting quicker ball. So I presume that in turn wouldn't kind of come into play when you're playing against these big guys. Another issue was I didn't think they moved them around enough either. You know, we're used to Leinster, like every time you're talking about, you know, kicking penalties, but you're also giving these big lads a chance to rest for about a minute and a half every time you go, instead of going up the line and really going for the juggler. So look, Leinster have played immense rugby, amazing rugby to watch all season, but they looked a little bit tired to me, and it wasn't the type of rugby and the style I'd seen them playing. So I don't know, is it a kind of a final? Were they tired? Did maybe the game plan, what was their game plan? I'm not too sure, but you can't take away from how they've played all season, and I would imagine we'll see a big showing against Glasgow again.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because you think of that decision to kick to the corner early on and there was a turnover and then they stopped doing it. So that suggests the players have the capacity and the permission to make a decision how they feel. But it's a fairly seismic change in your tactics, isn't it? Like you're talking there, Fiona, well, kick to the corner, don't give these big lads a chance to rest and move them around. What's the last thing Skelton wants? He doesn't have to jog back again and go again and we have to defend another maul. And so that's a fairly big abandonment of a core area, as in when we get a penalty, what are we going to do? First one doesn't go well, okay, we're going to retreat. They must have really sensed something about La Rochelle at the breakdown there, Keane. But it was noteworthy Johnny Sexton brought that up in his post-match comments without being specifically asked about the decision to kick for penalties. He almost said, just brought it up himself. People are going to say, "Oh, we kicked for the post," and that's hindsight. But it was almost like him, I think, bringing it up himself and wondering, actually, God, that does go against the grain of what we're about for the other 11 months of the year.
You're spot on, Joe. Because I meant to say that earlier, actually, that Johnny Sexton brought it up, and none of us had actually asked him about it. So you can think that's only a few minutes after the game. So there are definitely thoughts that was running through his head, and it's the fact that they've been doing it so successfully, and then to go away from it in the biggest game of the season. And again, like I'll say, like I know cup finals are different and you don't get any extra points for how you win them, but I just felt that they were giving La Rochelle, like you said, a breather, but also a psychological advantage as well. And I think another point worth mentioning is, and we rightly laud Leinster for the amount of players they use. They used 60 players this season, with Ben Murphy coming to 60th last week. But we talk about their strength and depth, but for me yesterday, they got very, very, very little off the bench. Dan Sheehan came on early and played well, and Rhys Ruddock and Cian Healy and Michael Alatoa, between the three of them, they each hit double figures for tackles made. But you compare that to the impact that La Rochelle got, and I thought Bottia was exceptional when he came on, and Retier obviously scored the try, and he's very interesting. I think I was telling you this, Joe, he's actually a back three player who's been converted into a scrum half. And I think this comes back to kind of O'Gara's time in the Crusaders, because he doesn't really care about positions, because Bottia is the same. Bottia is a centre who plays back row. It's all about getting your best players onto the pitch. So he knew that, he had a stacked back three, but he wanted to get Retier into the pitch somehow. And he comes on and he scores a decisive try. But I just didn't feel like Leinster got an awful lot from their bench. And I think that's a big issue, because I was looking back, and Kieran Frawley was an unused replacement, and he was also on the bench for the semi-final last year, and I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying he didn't get off the bench that day either.
Sorry to interrupt. I wasn't in here when the team was named. What jumped out to me there was, Jordan Larmour did enough surely to warrant 20 minutes at the end. See, I suppose, Fiona, further to O'Gara's stats about Leinster scoring most of their points early on, that bench often come on in a pretty cosy position.
Yeah, and that's it. And you saw these guys coming on, and it was like a cauldron of pressure they were coming on. And I know Ala Latoa, he was good around the park, but I mean, scrummaging wise, he was fairly poor. I thought Dan Sheehan was good, but we saw weakness in the scrum as well when Keller was out. So it was almost, you're talking about Larmer. He showed he has that X factor against Munster the week before. Would you not? I don't understand how you wouldn't want him on the bench. I know you have to reward the guys, obviously, that were there in the semi-final, and as a coach you have to work like that as well. But he was just someone that could come on and give you a spark. Whereas Frawley, he's brilliant. He's a centre, but I would have loved someone in the back three on their bench that really came on and really attacked, because Keenan, Lowe didn't get the ball that much. Jimmy O'Brien, it was just, they were a bit flat, I thought. And I thought someone like Larmer, if he was on for 20 minutes, would have offered a little bit of spark. So I thought that was unusual. But you're definitely right, Keane. The bench, the game changers were that La Rochelle had their front row. You had Bosch coming on, Sclavy, like they were so good. And it's Leinster, they rotate squads, but I think they were showing up that there was no big kind of game changer or no exciting player that was coming off the bench that could have tilted in their direction.
Did feel like a moment, Keane, didn't it, when there was the Pierre Bourguet try on 59 minutes and that was Sexton's last contribution. You know, like, you can understand the predicament. Do I kick and take him on? And then Keenan had the same issue and they gave away the penalty and that led to the try. But Sexton goes off, Porter goes off, Furlong goes off in the same 2-3 minutes. Suddenly felt like a moment in that game.
Yeah, I think if we're being honest and calling a spade, I thought that was a very poor error by Johnny Sexton for a player of his experience.
That'll haunt him.
And for it to be his last action as well, it was a really, really poor error. It put Hugo Keenan in an awful position, really, and they score from draw, and that's pretty much what got them the late comeback. But like Fiona will know this as well from coaching, like rugby now more than ever is a 23-person game, and that isn't a cliche, because it's unheard of really for subs to be unused. So even you think back to pretty much like James Ryan and Ross Maloney. Ross Maloney came off, I think, around 77 minutes, and Joe McCarthy came on for 3 minutes, off the bench. And like, if you're going to have guys on the bench, like, you need to have guys who are going to come in. And to be fair, I felt like it was a bench that was picked to see out a game rather than chase a game, because if they felt like they were going to need to chase a game, I think Larmer and Ryan Baird would have been on the bench. But and this isn't really necessarily a criticism of the personnel that they picked. It's more that they just didn't get what they wanted from them. And if you looked up the minutes, the amount between them that the bench played, it wasn't a whole lot. So in that heat, and it was roasting, it is roasting over here, like 30 degrees in that heat, energy sapping, you needed fresh legs. And the fresh legs that came on, fair enough, they held their own, like, defensively, but to keep that up for whatever it was, the 20 minutes at the end, I certainly got the sense that, I don't know that it come across on TV, but I felt like it was inevitable. It was only a matter of time before La Rochelle scored.
It probably did. I mean, ironically, they only had to see out the game. I mean, Leinster were ahead all the way until the 80th minute. So actually, if seeing out the game was all that was required of the bench and they had done it, then they were home and hose. Certainly, I don't know, Fiona, what your sense was watching TV. Certainly the try happens and it's back to a point. But you see, then, of course, Thomas Lavelle gives away the dumbest yellow card of all time, and you think, well, that's coughed it back up now. So, but certainly, Fiona, it did feel last 5, 6, 7 minutes. It was about 7, 8 minutes they were camped on the Leinster try line, and it seemed like pretty early on in every passage of play there was a penalty advantage. It started to feel ominous. Like, Leinster were incredible in those few minutes. I mean, they held out for a very long time.
Yeah, you have to say fair play. Imagine the bodies thrown on the line, and it was probably about 7, 8 minutes of like sheer physical contact. Their big ball carriers were running at him. Will Skelton was running at him. I thought their height. The only thing, Joe, that really I was baffled about is, obviously they gave away a few penalties, and I know Barnes was really looking at it. A lot of them were for offside, and maybe not rolling away. But I thought no one went for that turnover. There was no one at that stage. I mean, you knew there was 2 minutes left on the clock. You knew if you got a big turnover, it's game over. If you could get on that ball. And now La Rochelle were clinical in their clean out, but I thought Leinster, and of course they're going to be tired this time, but normally we see those big moments, Doris van der Fleer coming up with those big turnovers, even Cian Healy, and it was almost no one even attempted to go for that poach. They were happy with the defence, but you couldn't hold out that La Rochelle. They were so clinical, they were square carrying, they were gearing in ground with every carry, and then obviously they'd get their they'd get their penalty advantage after maybe 3, 4, 5 phases, and they never went out wide or anything. They still battered towards that Leinster line.
Anything from the post-match, Cian, that grabbed you? I think we did see a lot of O'Gara and a little bit of Leo Cullen as well, so we got a good sense of both coaches. I don't know, did any players stand out or any contributions linger in the memory?
Well, unfortunately, we didn't get to speak to any of the Leinster players. We were supposed to, but there was some confusion about they went out the wrong exit. They were directed out the wrong exit or something. So
that's the old I'm on the phone routine. Oh, the wrong exit.
Well,
sorry.
It was kind of set up like the football press conferences where you have to walk through the room, you know, and you're supposed to grab them. Which back when I was covering football, I used to hate doing that, particularly after a defeat and after a cup final defeat. Who's going to want to talk to you? But I believe there was a couple of players lined up to speak to us, but they didn't come out. But I actually caught up with Donnacha Ryan afterwards, who is a bit of a he gets forgotten about a little bit because ROG gets all the headlines, but he has made a big impact in La Rochelle in his first season. Again, chatting to their sporting director, he's been seriously impressed with what he's done. So he's working around the line out and the maul and the breakdown and all areas that were pretty key to La Rochelle winning. So it's not easy for Irish coaches to come into a French club, and like the La Rochelle story is amazing. Like they only got promoted to the top 14 back in 2014, and for Ronan O'Gara to come in the way he has and basically go to the board and say, we want to go after Europe as well. Now, to be fair, John O'Gibbs was doing that last season and while he was there, but it's not easy to change that culture. We've seen so many French teams and they just don't buy into the Champions Cup because top 14 is where it's at. And the top 14 is definitely, I would say, the priority still for like the likes of La Rochelle. But for him to go in and change that culture, and honestly, the scenes yesterday were really special. And the Leinster players went out the back door of the Stade Velodrome, but the La Rochelle players came through the front door, and you had Raymond Rule was walking through afterwards with they have these couple of beatboxes which are absolutely massive. So during the captain's run as well, they bring them out and they just play their own music. So you had Raymond Rule walking topless through the mix zone with his medal around his neck, putting a beatbox behind him, playing some rap tunes, and it was just incredible really to see what it means to these players. And like I said at the start of the conversation, you could see what it means to the people. But yeah, I had a good chat with Donnacha Ryan, and one of the things that kind of jumped out to me as well from Ronan O'Gara's comments was that when he first came here to La Rochelle, he thought winning a Champions Cup was so far beyond, down the line in terms of when they were going to be able to achieve it. So I think they're ahead of schedule, certainly from what O'Gara would have thought as well. And I think, like, you look at Donnacha Ryan, he's only in the door a wet week, and he's already got a Champions Cup medal around his neck. So it's great for Irish rugby to see these two guys in what it seems like a brilliant club, a beautiful part of the world, and they're right at the forefront of it. And I wouldn't be surprised over the next couple of seasons if we see Donnacha Ryan even taking on more responsibility than he already has. Like I said, it's great for Irish rugby.
Well, who knows where O'Gara is going to be in a couple of years? I mean, post World Cup, are you telling me that big countries aren't going to send him out? I mean, his credentials are incredible. Fiona, do you count this as like pretty much a Munster European? Is this like three Munster European? Is that how it's been received down there? Certainly half a European title at least.
Has to be. The bar I was in anyway was going crazy. All the Munster fans were absolutely loving it. No, look, I think it's Raj is always, especially close to the heart. And even in the interview afterwards, when he was talking on air, just talking about and calling Donnacha Ryan Skin, and it just, to hear that accent, and and he's brilliant, and he's loved down here.
Yeah. Would that bar have been cheering La Rochelle if there was just a French coaching ticket?
I'd say so. No.
Look how petty you are down there now. That all you've left.
They had. There was a few La Rochelle jerseys around the place, so definitely big fans, I'd say, down here.
I can imagine.
You would have enjoyed it on
extraordinary. Sorry, Cian.
You would have enjoyed it on the flight over, Fiona. There was actually loads of Munster supporters here. There was one of the great things you were asking Joe about at the start of the conversation, and I've been lucky enough to be at a lot of Champions Cup finals, including as a fan as well. And one of the cool things is the amount of like different jerseys, because you have fans from all clubs will just come for the weekend, and it makes for a brilliant atmosphere. But I even spotted a Kerry jersey actually, which was just, I thought, the most typical thing. You see Kerry jerseys at every sporting event. But on my flight over, there was a group of Munster fans, and the captain, before we took off, was going to say, you know, because there was loads of Leinster fans obviously on the flight too, you know, best of luck to Leinster or whatever. And didn't the group of Munster fans start chanting "Allez la Rochelle," sorry, down the back of the plane? So it was just incredible. But yeah, there was red Munster jerseys here, everywhere actually. I saw plenty of them, but I have to say a lot of them did have yellow La Rochelle flags.
No doubt. Well, listen, extraordinary. So we'll be talking about this, I'm sure, across the week as well. But for the time being, Fiona Hayes, thanks very much, Fiona.
Nice one. Thanks, Joe.
And Cian Tracey, I'm sure, writing about it in tomorrow's Irish Independent. Thanks, Cian.
Cheers, Joe. See you, Fiona.
Cheers. Our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in. We're going to take a short ad break, and then we will update you on what's going on at Clona's next.
Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Screen Time with John Fardy.
Season 4 of Stranger Things is finally here. And this week on Screen Time, I talk to the cast of Netflix